Hello explorers of obsolete tape formats. In this video I'm going to be doing a review of the Tascam 424 Mark III, give you an overview of all the different features, talk about my experiences repairing these. I'll also talk a little bit about how it compares to other models, particularly those made by Tascam. I can say with some reliability that this was a unit that came out in 2001. I say that because there is a Sound on Sound review that's been archived on the internet. I'm slightly less clear on how much it was priced at the time. There is some hearsay that it was £799 in the UK market. The reason that I mention that is that some people rather dismiss multi-track cassette recorders as a sort of novelty item because in some ways they've been superseded by digital recorders. But I wish to make a point that if this were being released today, it would be in the same sort of bracket as MPC Live, the original OP1, Someone's got to save up pretty hard or have a significant income in order to buy one of these. If, by the way, anyone's got a better number for how much this cost back in the day, they've got like a print ad or something they can refer to, let me know in the comments. So this unit was pitched at a more serious or wealthy musician than the 414 that they also had in the market at the time, or the budget Portability Mark II, which was also out around that time. This whole generation had this blue plastic, which I personally love. It is pretty light. I would say it's portable because you could easily carry it just one person. It's a bit big to fit in a backpack or something, so you need a pretty big basket or bag or something if you're going to go on a bike. You need quite a big case or something to protect it if you're going to go in public transport, but it's certainly not heavy, so it is truly portable. If I trick this into thinking that there is a cassette here, hopefully you can see the two heads I've raised here, and we can see that there's a black head here, that's the raise head, and the silver one is the combination record and playback head. It will either record information to the tape or receive information from the tape depending on what mode you're in. The cassette player is capable of playing back in high speed or low speed. High speed is 3 3/4 inches per second, whereas low speed is 1 7/8 inches per second. The lower of those two speeds is the speed of tapes that you would put in a standard cassette player like a Walkman or a car stereo from the late 1980s or early 1990s. The advantage of the higher speed is the response to the high end is better, although the sacrifice is that you run through tapes twice as fast. So while you would only get 45 minutes of recording out of a 90-minute cassette, even in standard speed, because we only record on one side of the tape, in high speed we would actually only get 22.5 minutes of recording. So maybe you can fit like 3, maybe 4 songs on there, but you get a bit more high fidelity from that. In addition to the tape speed control, we also have this pitch control wheel down here. The idea is that this has been calibrated out of the factory or by your service technician so that if your favourite recording artist recorded a song in the key of C, then it plays back at the key of C. They've added this feature though so that you've got the facility to incorporate instruments that aren't at concert pitch into your recordings. So say you've already laid down some bass and some guitar for your song and it's a concert pitch, but then you get to grandma's piano, it's half a semitone flat. You would be able to turn this so that temporarily the sound of your recording is in tune with the piano, and then once you finish the recording you put it back to normal and your piano will remain in tune with the other stuff. I think that's the main reason that they've included that. You can actually do some kind of creative stuff with it. You've got about perfect fifth of range here, so you can sort of do theremin-y stuff where this is your volume control and this is your pitch control. You can sort of play melodies and stuff. Wise men say on the fool's religion. The heads record 4 tracks. You can record to all 4 of them simultaneously. You can also record more than one input signal to a tape track. So you could record like 6 drum mics, but then make a stereo blend of them. So you've got like a sort of like stereo audio picture of your drum kit, and then only record it to 2 tracks and leave 2 open to do overdubs. So you can do things like that. This is a high bias machine, so it's expecting likes of TDK, SA, Max L, XL2. I mean, those are the 2 specific tape formulations that are mentioned in the manual. Really, any Type 2 will get good performance out of the machine. Type 1 tapes, you can put them in here and record. They leave a bit more residue in the head, so you want to clean them a bit more often. You'll find that you get a bit more bass response, less high end, more hiss if you use Type 1 tapes. But really, no harm will be done. Do metal tapes work in this? I don't know. I've never used a metal tape in one of these. They cost a fortune these days, so I've never experimented with it. I'm led to believe that the bias that comes out of the erase head in this may not effectively erase stuff on a metal tape, so I would avoid it. It certainly says to avoid it in the manual. We can process the sound using DBX noise reduction. The switch to turn that on and off is in the back. It's currently off. Hopefully using the magic of post-production, I can zoom in on this bit and you'll see DBX light come on. You can turn that on for all 4 tape tracks, or just 3 of them and leave it off in track 4. The reason being that this has a synchronization facility. That basically means you can send the signal from track 4 out the back here so it can talk to MIDI equipment and so on. There's maybe not so much of an application for that these days, but at the time this came out, digital audio workstations and all these sorts of technologies weren't as advanced or as common as they are now, and so it was important that this be able to talk to MIDI gear, and that's how it's handled on this machine. The thing to understand about the DBX noise reduction is that it's a 2-step process. I feel like it's a compander, it's compression and expansion. And so it's processed in the way to tape and it's processed in the way out. So if you record with DBX, you really want to play back with DBX. And if you don't record with DBX, you don't want DBX on when you play it back. Not that anything bad will happen to the machine or it'll sound completely unintelligible, but you will get some weird pumping artifacts if you mix and match it like that. But since the majority of Tascam portastudios use DBX noise reduction or have no noise reduction, the ability to turn this off and switch the tape speed means that most demos that were made on another Tascam portastudio, you're going to be able to play them back at full fidelity using this machine. Put in a test tape here. Won't be able to hear it, but you can see the meters light up. We have these piano touch buttons, and we also have a significant amount of features here with the digital memory. This isn't a recorder, it's just a way to mark several places on the tape, so you can do things like rehearse a particular section of a song, so it'll just rewind over the same section over and over and over, so you get to like practice your part before you record. It can take you to certain points in the tape, so you can set one location to be like the beginning of your middle eight and the other to be like the start of your guitar solo. I don't know. I've demonstrated this in a separate video. I'll put a link to that video down in the description of this one. Moving around to the back panel, we can see that we have mic line inputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 here. These are 1/4 inch mono sockets. We can also access mic channels via these 4 XLR sockets. There's an option for channels 5 and 6 to either use the 5 and 6 1/4 inch jack socket, or you can access the odd numbers 1 and 3 on channel 5, or the even numbers 2 and 4 on channel 6. So if you want to do the sort of thing where you record 6 channels simultaneously, at least 2 of those are going to have to be via these 2 sockets. None of these inputs have phantom power on them, so regardless of whether you're using the 1/4" jacks or the XLR sockets, you would need to have an external mixer in order to provide phantom power. Down here we have the 4 tape outs. That's the output directly from the cassette without passing through the mixer at all. This is useful if you want to capture 4 separate monaural stems into a digital audio workstation and do your mix in the digital domain, having made the initial recording in the analog domain. Down here is our DBX switch, so we can have it off, on all tracks, or it says sync mode, which basically means that you've got DBX on tracks 1 through 3, but it's turned off for track 4. These 2 sockets here are for the 7/8 input, which is a stereo input. There is no mixer strip for this. You're just controlling the level using the orange knob. The switch below it controls whether you're taking in a stereo signal or a mono signal, or whether that input's just turned off. These 2 sockets are your effect sends. This is for effect 1, this is for effect 2. Can you also use it as a tape cue output? Now we have our line output here, a monitor output here. And this here is input socket for a foot switch, so you can remote punch in and out. I believe that you could put in a switchable polarity piano sustain pedal and use that if you weren't able to locate the original part they suggested. Each of the 6 mixer channels has a trim control, so if you leave this right down here where it says line, then if you take a signal in there at -10 decibels, like line level, then it's going to come in at unity gain. But if you're attaching a microphone, then you can add a significant amount of gain by turning it to the right. We've got a high shelf and a low shelf and a mid-range EQ, which is parametric. So we can set the center point of a frequency that we're boosting and cutting between 250 Hz and 5000 Hz. The high and low EQ are shelving type. The high EQ is at 10 kHz, low EQ is at 100 Hz. The mid-range gives you plus or minus 12 decibels. The high and low shelves are plus or minus 10 decibels. Nice compromise. I mean, in an ideal world, they'd have put in 2 dual gang pots here, so you had the kind of mid-range capabilities of a 244 and a 246 in addition to the high and low EQ, but no, we can't have everything. It's still good, versatile equalization. And then we're capable of sending the signal to 2 effects. The lower section of this effect send does double up as a tape cue. Tape cue is a way to make sure that what you're listening to in headphones, or however it is you're monitoring your recording signal as you perform on your instrument. But you keep that separate from what's actually going to tape, so you're not printing your headphone mix to tape. So you can have this either as effect 2 or as a tape cue. The point is that while you're tracking, you would use these knobs as a tape cue, but then during mix down, you've got the ability to send to 2 different monaural effects or 1 stereo effect. So you could have like a mono spring reverb and a delay. You bring them back on your channels 5 and 6, meaning that you can EQ them independently and place them within the stereo field. Or you would pan these return channels hard left and hard right, and effect 1 and effect 2 become the left hand and right hand side of 1 stereo effect. So, you know, say something like a digital reverb that's meant to sound like a cavernous space or a hall or whatever. In that way you could send the whole signal through a stereo reverb. Pan controls and faders are kind of self-explanatory. Looking at these switches up here for the input, you either turn the mixer channel off altogether. To the right, it's taking its signal from tape. To the left, and it's coming from your mic line input. That's the XLR and jack sockets. That's the case for channels 1, 2, 3, 4. Channels 5 and 6 are slightly different. Channel 5, you can receive input from inputs number 1, 3, or 5. 6 can receive their inputs from channels 2, 4, or 6. The usual configuration is you would use 5 and 6, and either you're actually putting a separate input in here if you're doing that multi-mic thing I was talking about, where you're blending several mics onto only 1 or 2 tracks to leave other tracks open for overdubbing, or you would use inputs 5 or 6 as your effects return. So the affected signal, which is being sent through these knobs out to the effects output sockets, are then coming back in on these sockets, and in that way the affected signal is coming through these mixer channels and being blended at the output here during a mix down or during a bounce. Speaking briefly about my experiences fixing these, one of the main things you're going to see with these is that the power supply unit gets lost. If I just turn this off a second, this isn't actually the original. I wired one up using instructions in a video that Third Island made. It does use this 6-pin DIN socket. The workaround involves using a 12-volt AC adapter. That's the most common thing I've had to do with these, really, is just wire up new power supplies, because these have been languishing in someone's attic or garage or something, and the owner can't find the power supply anymore. For this whole generation, the little Mitsubishi motors that are in there, they're rotating as soon as the unit's turned on. It doesn't actually matter whether there's a tape in there or not. And so if they're left on for a long time, the regulator chip that's in the motor is doing work and creating heat, and after a certain amount of time they will actually burn out. So that's not unique to this model. Really, all the 90s Tascams use this motor and they're all subject to this problem. Other than that, it's just like little electrical niggles. Really pretty standard stuff. It's certainly not a nightmare to have to fix, despite being quite feature rich. It's not that hard to disassemble. It's not distributed over loads and loads of little printed circuit boards the way its predecessor, the 44 Mark II, was. Yeah, it's not a difficult unit to refurbish, particularly in my view. When this unit entered the market, its competitors would have been Fostex XR7, Yamaha MT4X, and the Marantz PMD 740. Really, of those, the PMD 740 is the only one that gives it a run for its money in terms of the feature set. The XR7 doesn't have a mid-range control and EQ, slightly more limited in other ways. Look out for a review of that model coming up at some point. The MT4X was really more equivalent to this unit's predecessor, the 424 Mark II, in that it does have effects returns, but it doesn't have this channel 5/6. The PMD 740, on the other hand, certainly has some slight advantages to this, but also some slight disadvantages. It really depends on your personal preferences, which you would say was better. They're more or less equivalent, but other than the Marantz, really we're going to have to go back to Tascam's legacy products before we find anything else with like such a rich feature set and such a small footprint. I'm thinking specifically of the 464, also the 246, which was actually a bit larger and heavier, but it's the most directly equivalent in its feature set to the 424 Mark III. It differs because of analog meters. It lacked XLR inputs, but it did have insert points allowing you to use external preamps. I've gone over this in my review of the 246, so I'll put some of the reviews to the other units I've mentioned in the description of this video. So, I mean, in summary, I'd say 464 is a close contender, 246 is maybe my equal favourite. As far as a feature-rich 4-track goes, yeah, like, this is the shit. This is the dog's bollocks, in my opinion. Thank you for making it this far. I've got a whole bunch of other reviews of other 4-tracks, more in the pipeline, so if you find this helpful, consider subscribing to the channel. If you spend a lot of time fixing this stuff, I do exclusive content on Patreon, just started using Instagram, so yeah, check me out on various platforms. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon.